Hello and welcome to the American Council on Exercise live webinars continuing education series. My name is Jackie Crockford and I will be your host for today's live presentation. You are joining us for free today via YouTube, so thank you so much for taking the time to enjoy this presentation with our presenter. As a reminder, you can type in any questions, or if you're having any difficulties, you can type that information into your YouTube chat bar, and I will be monitoring that throughout today's live webinar. Once again, you are watching today for free, so that means that no continuing education credits are awarded. However, if you would like to receive your 0.1 CECs after today's webinar, you can do so by purchasing a recorded version of this course at the link provided on your screen. That's acefitness.org/pastwebinars. We'll go over a little bit later how you can earn those continuing education credits. Okay, if you're ready for your course, let's get started. Welcome to Performance Nutrition Strategies. Fuel your goal. My name is Jackie Crockford and I will be your host for this course. Joining me today is our presenter, Dr. Susan Kleiner. Susan.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. You're joining us from Seattle, where you have a practice as a registered dietitian.
Yes.
Right? So tell us a little bit about what you do there and kind of maybe some of the clients that you work with mostly.
I get to work with great clients that are both active and athletic, all the way to elite athletes. I work with the Seattle Storm, our great WNBA team. I also do consulting with business and industry. I do speaking, writing, and communicating all about nutrition and high performance.
Great. So today we're talking nutrition and talking a little bit about how to bridge the gap between maybe some performance goals and some aesthetic goals. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that happens, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're ready to get started.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. It's a beautiful campus, the ACE headquarters here in San Diego. So the objective underpinning any time you are working with diet really are the same as the learning objectives today, to base everything you do on research, so have an understanding of research-based recommendations, to have practical knowledge about food choices and dietary strategies, and then how do you apply those practical nutritional strategies when you are working one-on-one with a client? So, as Jackie said, I am a sports nutritionist. The goal of my clients ultimately is to enhance their athletic performance. But no different than your clients, or probably anybody you work with who trains hard, my clients also want to see physical benefits, sort of aesthetic changes, what I call sculpting the body, from the hard training work that they do. What I have learned over the decades of working in this field is that I must keep my mind on fueling the athletic goal. That is the ultimate goal, both for meeting the athletic challenge and getting the win, but it is also the ideal way to accomplish the body sculpting that an athlete or your client is looking to achieve. Marketing mumbo jumbo out of the diet world has nothing to do with fueling athletic performance. Shrinking and basically getting skinny and disappearing, restricting, is not a high performance goal, and it is not a high performance diet. We must fuel the real needs of an athlete and their athletic challenge. They need to eat to fuel their training so that they can gain muscle strength and power. It is through mindfully focusing on fueling that challenge and that goal that we can help them, what I say, thread the needle between physical performance, and physique accommodation. And that's what we're going to look at today. My book, The New Power Eating, is based on these principles. Build your body up. Don't tear it down. Fuel your goal and never underfuel training. That marketing mumbo jumbo, that's about tearing your body down, not building your body up. The power eating paradigm that is the sort of foundational concept underneath is to eat more, to gain energy, to train harder, to build muscle, and then if you need to burn fat, extra fat, you will. It will lead to sculpting your body, building up and then sculpting rather than tearing down. The problem we all face with clients is that they notoriously underfuel. From elite athletes to an everyday athlete, whether intentional or unintentionally, whether there is truly disordered eating or just a lack of knowledge, they commonly come into our practices, yours and mine, eating far less than what they need optimally. They often have, as I said, more than one training goal, that goal of physical performance and that goal of physique and aesthetic sculpting. But even within their sport, they can have competing goals, meaning that they're trying to adjust a power to weight ratio, where they believe that if, in order to increase their power, they can't put on any more weight, they need to decrease their weight to adjust that ratio in the direction that they need. For instance, for a rower or a cyclist or an endurance runner, any kind of athlete where the power to weight ratio matters. It is our job to help them understand that through managing their nutrition and their energy intake, we can help them continue to gain power, perhaps without gaining any more weight, no hypertrophy, just increase in power. And then if they need to drop weight, how to do that very carefully so that, number one, they don't lose power, but that it keeps them at a very competitive level. So the strategy is then always to fuel training, but you are fueling also to recover, repair, and grow. This is critically important to understand the full spectrum of fueling. So as I said, the science matters. Let's look at the evidence that we have. So the most fundamental need that we have for exercise is energy. We've got to actually fuel that training with the right gas, right? The right pedal to the metal. And what we thought we understood decades ago, that if you looked at energy balance, and if you understood energy output, it would be the prediction of what your energy intake need would be, that was a guiding light, energy balance. That measuring energy output was the predictor to the amount of fuel we needed incoming. And as I said, that's kind of old news. What we've learned is that different from decades ago, when we thought that the body would fuel our basic physiological needs first, and then the energy left over fueled our high metabolic demand energy expenditure second, it's actually the other way around. That our body will fuel first the energy of highest metabolic demand, our energy demands, and then what is left over is what fuels our basic physiological needs. And as I said, most of our clients come in underfueled, not meeting their true energy needs. And so they never really fully fuel these fundamental physiological systems that actually lead to good health, what keeps us sustaining a long athletic career and keeps us healthy and winning for a lifetime. So we've discovered that if we are not fully fueling those basic physiological needs, the fundamental systems in the body, that means our resting metabolic rate is lower than it would optimally be if energy intake was full, if we were fully fueling. And so if resting metabolic rate is lower, and resting metabolic rate makes up a large proportion of our energy output, then energy balance data of outgoing energy utilization is fake news. It's not real. It is altered. It is artificially low. And so we can't use energy output as our guiding predictor of our energy intake needs, particularly when energy intake is low. And we discovered this by really not being able to solve the conundrum of how female distance athletes could eat so little compared to what we would predict their energy needs would be based on metabolic energy data of various exercise and sort of basal energy needs. They would always have such a lower energy intake, yet they could be world-class athletes. How the heck could they do that? Well, it's because our idea of what the primary fueling system was wrong. We were thinking, again, that we fueled basic energy needs first for health and energy of exercise second. No, it's the other way around, which explains why female athletes so readily lose reproductive function or have bone mineral issues and other issues as well. This is the explanation, and it has led to a much better understanding of energy needs and energy metabolism in the body of certainly a female athlete, and we will talk about males in the upcoming slides. So the new concept, the guiding light, is now called energy availability. That's the real news. It is the energy left over to fuel our fundamental physiological systems after we have fueled the energy of exercise expenditure, okay? So we need energy intake data, we need exercise energy expenditure data, that high metabolic demand, and we need a fat-free mass measure. So if you don't know how to use good nutritional diet methodology to collect dietary intake data from a client, or you don't have an ability to measure exercise energy expenditure or fat-free mass, then you should probably partner with a registered dietitian who can help you and guide you through, or partner with you together with your client to get your energy intake data, accurate energy intake data from your client, and you would need to partner with a lab that can give you exercise energy expenditure and or fat-free mass data, because these are required to do this energy availability calculation. So energy availability is normalized to fat-free mass because fat-free mass is the tissue in our body that is most metabolically active. And so we take energy intake, we subtract the energy of exercise, and then we normalize or divide that value by kilograms of fat-free mass. And so low energy availability is kilocalories per kilogram of fat-free mass. Not surprisingly, it explains now much of the altered physiological output in the female athlete, such as disturbed reproductive function, amenorrhea, oligomenorrhea, classic in a very active female who is underfueling. The ultimate outcome of underfueling is actually the manifestation of something called the female athlete triad, and I'm sure that most of you are familiar with that concept. It goes along kind of in stages over a spectrum, and we'll look at that slide in a moment. So you have your moment of health, your full health, full fueling, and then over time may develop the absolute clinical manifestation of the female athlete triad. What we have learned is that we don't need the client to become a patient to go all the way through that sort of continuum to get to classic clinical symptoms that are measurable of the female athlete triad, including osteoporosis and amenorrhea and low energy intake, that if we can measure low energy intake very early on in the female, we may identify someone at risk and halt that whole process. Low energy availability may explain much of what leads to the female athlete triad. So the International Olympic Committee, looking at the universe of athletes, was aware and is aware that this is not a problem only in female athletes. That male athletes also restrict and underfuel based on the sport, and the goal of their sport is an aesthetic sport like gymnastics, or like diving, figure skating, or are they cyclists, endurance athletes who are trying to be as light as they possibly can be in body weight, fixing that power to weight ratio as high as they can make it. And so even though all of the data on low energy availability is on females, the International Olympic Committee wants practitioners and professionals to understand the concept that male athletes may also succumb to low energy availability, and that even though in the presence of energy balance, they may also suffer the health consequences. And so they have renamed, for their purposes, low energy availability to relative energy deficiency in sport. You may have heard of it as RED-S. It's getting a lot of press as we ramp up to the Olympics. And again, it clarifies that energy balance does not mean healthy energy intake, and that male athletes should be included as potential sort of patients or victims in this syndrome. Reminder, very important reminder, that the data that we are looking at today and the data that the mother lode of data that exists is on female subjects, not males. And we do not know if it translates to males. There's the beginning of studies, but not many. And so obviously this leads to some controversy within the scientific community, but it helps people just learn about and understand the fact that all athletes can suffer from low energy intake. So again, here is that slide that I talked about that shows you the continuum from the green triangle, which is a fully healthy, fully fueled female athlete, all the way to the very unhealthy, ill female athlete triad patient. And we used to always attribute the female athlete triad to a number of factors. One was low energy availability or low energy intake, But it was also perhaps low fat mass, low percent body fat, high stress, high exercise demand. And what we really understand today is most likely the greatest impact on the development of the female athlete triad is actually low energy availability, which is why it's so important to be paying attention to the intake of your athlete and that they meet their true needs, not just what shows up as energy balance. So just a little bit of a graphic so you can see the profound impact on the health of any individual when energy intake is far below the needs of our fundamental, foundational health systems in the body. So energy availability are the calories required for optimal function of the body's fundamental physiological processes. If these aren't working, circulation, cellular maintenance, growth, temperature regulation, acid-base balance, immune function, reproduction, if this isn't working well, you may be able to have a championship year or two, maybe we even see 5 or 6, but an athletic career will be cut short, especially when it comes to the female athlete triad, bone mineral metabolism, fractures, frank breaks, just ongoing health problems that ultimately are career enders for that athlete. Just to let you know, what do I typically see in my practice? I very often see a client that comes in who's not necessarily restricting, as I said. They just may not have the knowledge that they can eat and need to eat more. And the most common caloric deficit for a female athlete is 800 to 1,000 calories below their daily need. 800 to 1,000 calories below. Typically, they come in eating somewhere around 2,200 to 2,400 calories a day. It's just way too low, but they are hearing the messages out of the diet world. It is so important for you as an exercise expert talking about fueling with a client to help them understand that the messaging out of the diet world is about tearing their body down, restricting, shrinking, and disappearing. It is not about increasing and enhancing athletic performance, fueling their training to increase muscle, to enhance endurance, strength, power, speed. And it is through doing those strategies that will ultimately help them sculpt their body. That's the outcome, not the goal. The outcome of fully fueling their training, becoming the best athlete they can be, and their body will follow, in most cases. Remember to work with an expert, a registered dietitian. If you are not a registered dietitian yourself, or any of this information, particularly the things I'm talking about here now, may be a little outside your scope of practice, but I find it is critically important to know, to have the practice knowledge, even if it is outside your scope of practice. So there are these numbers developed, remember, on the female subjects for energy availability. Here are the goals, and it's a big range. We start out anything below 30 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass per day puts the female athlete at risk of reproductive function. We know that number, that 29 versus 30 in research studies begins to show a lowering of endocrine function within the reproductive system. So nothing should ever be below 30 calories per kilogram per day. And I am telling you that the women coming into my office are often 800 to 1,000 calories below 30 calories per kilogram per day. So that's the basement. Never go below that. That's the floor. Then we look at adequate or optimal, and it is greater than or equal to 45 calories per kilogram per day. You can go above that. This is a wonderful target for that athlete trying to really enhance their performance and upping their training and their athletic challenge. Now, even in your average client, that everyday athlete who is more novice than experienced, who works out 3 to 4 times a week versus 5 or more times a week, in a woman, these numbers still are very good. They may not go as high as 45 calories per kilogram, but use that 30 as a good basement for an active woman. Now, within this range, this still allows for body fat loss. Don't look at 30 as the place where you begin to reduce calories to accomplish a caloric deficit. They are at a caloric deficit probably at 30 calories. The optimal intake would be closer to 40 to 45, and if they're really training hard, perhaps more. The range where they fall in the range depends on the volume and intensity of exercise of each training day or the training period. Okay, we've gone through a lot of science. Let's look at knowledge of practice. So starting with energy and macronutrient composition, that, just like energy, macronutrient composition will fall within a range, just as I said, lower to higher, based on the volume and intensity of exercise. So we periodize the diet along with or beside the periodized training protocol. That is something that I've been doing with power eating for decades. The concept of periodized training to meet the training goal is how we fuel the training session. And so diet adjusts in both energy and macronutrients based on the goal of the training period. So if you don't have access to the measurements for energy availability, these charts taken out of the New Power Eating are based on 30 plus years of research publication on energy needs, as well as my own experience with my clients combined. And you can use these as guideposts. Again, this may not be exact for your client, but it is a really good guidepost for you. Here I've separated the needs of a woman and a man, a male and a female, and separated out that novice or lesser training, fewer days of training client versus the more experienced, the more muscular, or the higher, more demand days of a more experienced client or athlete. And so you can see, again, it's a range depending on the individual and the training period of where you're going to target energy needs. So if you have someone who is far less experienced, you're going to say, you're thinking, well, I work with experienced, more elite athletes. You're working maybe with more everyday athlete, that person with really great fitness goals, but they are not competitive, maybe competitive with themselves, but not anybody else. Maybe their energy needs are at the lower end of this range, or maybe even slightly lower as you begin to get them into this range. So use your judgment, or again, work with a registered dietitian who can really help guide their needs during each kind of training goal session that you have. Again, this is a cross-training protocol where the athlete is doing the kinds of training that athletes do. They have their strength training, they have their flexibility, they have their sports-specific training, they may do some endurance, sort of steady state training. This is meeting the need of that kind of training protocol. So carbohydrate has all this question in coming through the diet world again. But there is some science, quite a bit of science, in fact, 50 years at least of science telling us that carbohydrate is the fuel of athletically challenging exercise. Period. End of story. As I said, and we're going to look at a few little data points in science, there really is data to show us that carbohydrate is required to fuel athletically challenging exercise, and it plays a very important role in recovery, repair, and growth. So let's look at some of that. If you are doing steady state exercise, if your client is just doing low to moderate intensity exercise, you can see here that up to 55% of exercise intensity or their maximum work capacity, they use, if they have a mixed diet, about half their fuel comes from carbohydrate, half their fuel comes from fat. If they are on a low carbohydrate diet or they have followed a fat adaptation dietary protocol, our body will push itself into using a secondary stream of energy, meaning fat, instead of the primary stream of energy, carbohydrate, to fuel low to moderate intensity exercise. And so you can do everything from sitting on a couch to going for a walk or doing moderate intensity exercise up to, really depending on the elite level of your client, 60, even 65%, the most elite athlete maybe up to 70% of their maximal work capacity, fueled mostly by fat. But if you want your client to train at a high intensity, which means 75% VO2 max or maximal work capacity, you can see that 75% about of their fuel comes from carbohydrate here, the green and the gray on the right-hand bar. And the higher the intensity as it goes up from there, the greater the contribution of carbohydrate to the fuel mix, and the less the contribution of fat. And you can't change this by changing your diet. You can't change this by adapting to fat. You can only fuel physiologically high intensity demand exercise with carbohydrate, period. Now, you may feel like you're working out as hard as you can. You may feel that you are at the highest level of intensity. But if you look at this chart that shows you first a fully carbohydrate-fueled athlete, a rate of perceived exertion at 9 or a 10, and their actual watt output, that's reality, is at a level of a 9 or a 10. But when they are underfueled, both in energy and carbohydrate in particular, their rate of perceived exertion will go up to a 9 or a 10, but their actual watt output, the actual work that they're doing, is relative to a 5 or a 6 from when they were fully fueled. So this is why folks end up in my office or come to you and say, I'm eating a perfect diet. I've cut out my carbs, I'm super clean, I'm training, more than ever, I'm still training really hard, but I'm getting nowhere. I've plateaued, I'm getting softer. If it continues, if they keep pushing, they start to go into low energy availability and my hair is falling out, or I've got brain fog, or I'm just not feeling well, or I can't control my emotions, I'm not sleeping well, my stomach is upset. All kinds of manifestations of problems, yet they are certain that they are training as hard as ever. Maybe they've even increased the volume of exercise. But what you can show them is that you perceive you're working out as hard as you can, but in fact you are not. and that's why you've plateaued. The intensity of your workout is significantly lower than you perceive that it is. And if we would measure your work output or your watt output, your actual energy output, it would be significantly lower, and that explains everything that's happening to you. Let's get some carbohydrates back in your diet. So here is a distribution of macronutrients for a cross-trainer, the cross-trainer that's a woman or a man that is more novice or working out fewer times a week versus that working out 5+ times a week. Protein stays fairly constant regardless of the number of times a week that they're working out, but their carbohydrate and fat will change and will be in a range because fuel will change based on the volume and intensity of the workout as well as the number of times they work out each week. If they're working out more, they need more energy. So again, remember that these are suggested ranges. If you have clients that are less elite, that are more novice, that are starting out, their energy need may be slightly lower. Now this is a little different. Some of you may have seen a recent excellent review publication by Dr. Brad Schoenfeld and others that looked at hypertrophy needs. And he found that when hypertrophy is the goal or muscle building, that the more well-trained or experienced athlete may actually not have a rate of increase of energy need the same as the novice lifter. This is different. This is cross-training. And so with cross-training, actually the energy need continues to go up. The more well-trained you are, the more muscle on your body, the higher the intensity and duration, and the greater the number of training sessions. How do we apply all this? Because our clients eat food. They don't eat grams and milligrams. And I don't like to stress out my clients by giving them a whole bunch of numbers to calculate or to follow. I want them thinking about food. That makes it more interesting, more fun, more real, more practical. And I like to give the sort of groupings of food relative to their goals and what they're doing in their training. I like to title the categories that way. So high performance carbs are fast energy fuel. These are your fuels for building strength, power, speed, and endurance within athletic performance. Now I want to make something clear. I want you to look all the way to the right and see whole grains and cereals. That doesn't mean that you have to eat bread. For those of you out there who are thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to eat bread, you don't have to. That you can eat whole grains, real grains. And on here I have brown rice, but there is farro and there's amaranth and there's quinoa. There's lots of whole grains that we can make just as easily as we make rice, or even easier, more like we make quinoa. And so you have a wide array of foods on this list. The goal is when we're eating our meals to choose whole foods and carbohydrate-rich sources, and a variety within these lists as I go on. Within each list, we want variety of choices because it is among the three groups of protein-rich, carbohydrate-rich, and fat-rich foods, and as well within those lists of foods, that we get the greatest nutrient variety, including not just macronutrients, but micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, phytochemicals or plant chemicals, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, food fibers, and food facts we have yet to identify. It is through variety that we really get to that rich source of nutrition that keeps us both healthy so that we can train day in and day out, as well as driving the athletic challenge. Protein, its function is recovery, repair, and growth. And so building blocks of your body, high performance proteins, and a whole list. And again, I want to emphasize the variety of both plant and animal, if you choose to eat animal. If you're eating only plant proteins, eat a variety within those plant proteins. If you are choosing mostly animal proteins, you're actually missing rich sources of that good variety of nutrient content and fiber in particular. But a wide variety ultimately is the goal. And finally, functional fuel, fat. High performance fats that promote cellular structure, cellular function, cellular protection, and slow burning fuel for low intensity, long duration exercise. That steady state exercise, very important to have good healthy fats on board. And a variety of foods, because it is in these foods in particular that we get our fat soluble vitamins, as well as really strong anti-inflammatories and antioxidants. So make sure to have an array of sources within your diet. How do we do that? A lot of clients come in and they say to me, okay, no, I should be eating blueberries and flax seeds and nuts and dairy and plant protein. How do I get all that in a day? Well, that's my job. And so you can help talk about food. If you're using the macronutrient chart guidelines, you can help your client plug that into an app so that they get a meal plan. You can help them through this kind of direction so that their meals are rich nutritional sources. Brown rice and whole wheat pasta counts as one of those high performance carbs. Whole grain bread, broccoli, fruit, and if you go all the way down to the bottom, vegetables, all sources of high performance carbs. Then you get to the rich, important protein sources. And here we have chicken and dairy. And then finally, the functional fuels of avocado slices and olive oil dressing. So I say olive oil dressing because it is the most affordable. If you can promote extra virgin olive oil, it is another fabulous source of a natural anti-inflammatory called oleocanthin, found only in extra virgin olive oil, that actually, if you looked at the chemical structure, it looks very similar to the drug ibuprofen that we know is an anti-inflammatory. So imagine washing your body with extra virgin olive oil inside all day long, a teaspoon here, a teaspoon there. It is a natural anti-inflammatory source. It gives you, when you drink just plain extra virgin olive oil, you'll get that sort of peppery finish at the back of your throat. That's the oleocanthin. So just a little nutrition tidbit. Now, different than our meals, when we want them robust nutritionally, snacks around exercise are very goal-oriented. We want them to empty from the stomach rapidly and fuel the training session and prepare us for recovery after exercise. And so hydration is critically important. Boosting mental focus and energy is absolutely essential. Preparing for that recovery and building and refueling after exercise, and helping to begin to minimize muscle damage and soreness. So we have lots of options of things that we can have pre-exercise, and this will really depend on your client. So you need to ask them, can you eat before exercise? They're going to know. They'll be able to tell you, there is no way I'm going to be able to eat. I worked with a rower, a youth rower, high school, who couldn't eat after lunch. Because if she did, by the time she was in the boat at 4 o'clock, she was puking over the side of the boat. So we had to use sports beverages to fuel her prior to exercise. Because if we just let her drink water, she was going to be massively underfueled going into her workout, and she would never make up that deficit, and she would never perform at her best. So learn about your client, ask them these things. Don't just tell them, ask them. So yogurt and fruit, and maybe or maybe not a little honey, depending on how much carbohydrate they need. Remember, there's carbohydrate in the yogurt, depending on the type of yogurt that you choose. If it's a Greek yogurt, it's a little lower in carb. If it's a regular yogurt, it's got a little more carb. And so you can use yogurt. Fruit gives you the healthy carb and lots of good micronutrients. And then if you need a little more, something like honey is a great choice, or another sugar source. 60 to 90 minutes before exercise, many people can use this as a wonderful pre-exercise snack. It gives them a little bit of protein and carb. You want a non-fat or a low-fat yogurt, because fat and fiber will slow digestion, will slow stomach emptying. So the goal of that pre-exercise snack is low in fat, low in fiber, mostly carb, and it can have a little bit of protein. Now, some people will react to protein before exercise, and it will upset their stomach. And so those people may know themselves, or you might do a little experimentation. It isn't essential to have that protein, so you can take it out. So a small turkey sandwich, again, now you're using a white bread. You're not using some big, heavy, whole grain bread, because this is not the time that we're trying to add fiber to the diet. That's for our meals, and snacks at another time during the day. You could have a light peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Lots of different options available. And then, of course, we get to the liquid beverages, smoothies, shakes, sports beverages. Look for things that are proven. If you are going to put your money into buying a supplement, and all sports beverages are supplements, regardless if they have a food label on them, you want to make sure, number one, hopefully that they're third-party laboratory certified, but that they have some proof for you that they actually work. And finally, never try anything new right before an event. These are things that you experiment with well before a race or a competition. So alternate fueling strategies are things you've probably heard of, and we're really not going to take time to talk about today. But I have to throw in, because we are talking so much about carbohydrate, and there is so much information out there about carbohydrate, that all of these strategies may have some small amount of research behind them, but none of them are actually proven to work. There may be some promise in some of them. Maybe for an individual athlete, they may be effective, but if you are trying to experiment on a client, you better be an expert, because if you make them sick, if you decrease their performance, you are going to be in trouble. So be very careful that you have real expertise before you start experimenting with diet. So I want to tell you the story of how I ended up most recently threading the needle with one of my very high-profile clients. And she has told this story herself. And so the story is in the book. I have full permission from the great Sue Bird. We call her the GOAT, the greatest of all time, point guard for the WNBA 2018 championship team, the Seattle Storm. So Sue, the oldest player in the WNBA, one of the best of all time, had come to me to increase her playing career, to lengthen her playing career. And I worked with a wonderful strength and conditioning coach. We partnered up, and we really helped Sue get on top of her training and her nutrition. So she has completely extended her playing career, and we're very excited to see her continue this year with our great Seattle Storm. So the first step was her energy intake, right? I wanted to measure energy availability, and I did have fat-free mass, and I did have exercise energy expenditure. And when we looked at her energy intake, and I had measured her energy availability, she was 1,000 calories below her optimal needs. Sue was not restricting. It was just oh my God, I didn't know I should be eating more. So we added, to start with, 560 calories or 140 grams of a carbohydrate supplement around her exercise. Because the idea for her of adding 1,000 calories more of food, and she needed this much more carb, was just overwhelming. You know, eyes glazed, how am I going to add that much food? How will I be fully fueled and still empty enough to train? That's the hard question. And that is one of the tricks of the trade for fueling any athletic individual, keeping them empty enough to train but fully fueled. And that's where sports beverages often come to play. So we used 560 calories of a carb supplement, 140 grams, just what she needed for around her training, and then 440 calories of a mixture of foods that she got to add and have fun with during the day. And she loved it, and it worked immediately, and she felt fantastic. And that is typically the response that you get. I say, just try it for a week. Nothing devastating is going to happen to you in a week. And typically the opposite is what happens. Oh my God, my brain feels like, you know, I'm on cloud nine. I just feel fantastic. I'm so fully fueled. My game has improved. A year and a half later, in the middle of this championship 2018 season, Sue calls me up and she says, hey doc, I have a really important photo shoot coming up and I'd like to get ripped abs. And I said, oh my God, really? Like, you know that that's the opposite of what we're trying to do here. And she said, yeah, I know, but it's a really important photo shoot and I'd really like to be ripped. So what we did was I knew that I needed to remove only, because she was fully fueled, about 350 to 400 calories from her diet every day. Yet I still needed to fully fuel her training. And so this is the trick. Remove some of those calories during the day from fat, remove some carbohydrate, but then make sure that around training you've got all the carbohydrate she needs. And so we actually increased her carbohydrate around her exercise, pre, during, and post, so that she fully fueled then, but lightened up the rest of the day. And she had to let go of some of those fun foods and snacks that she loved, that she could have added in originally. And I said, you've got 2 weeks. That's it. Because after 2 weeks, this will compromise your play. But for 2 weeks, you have enough to keep going. So these were her snacks. I showed you her meals. She always had yogurt and fruit. She always had a smoothie. We adjusted that smoothie a little bit. And then, as I said, added in a little more carb around her training because we knew she was burning it off. So the most important thing for you to remember from this whole webinar is fuel your goal. If you're interested in some resources, I have 2 slides with an array of research studies on them that are particularly pertinent to what I've talked about here today. I also have a huge list of resources and citations in my book, The New Power Eating. So it has been my honor and privilege to talk with you today, and now I'm going to call up Jackie back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. That was great. Just so much great information that I hope we can all digest together. If we have some questions, I know that we have some here from our live audience.
Yeah.
We'll take those questions. If you have a question for Susan, you can take the time to type those in now, and we'll spend just a few minutes here in a moment taking those live questions. If you would like to continue the conversation with Susan and learn a little bit more about her and follow her and learn more of this great information about nutrition, her contact information is there on your slide, and you can stay in touch with her as well. And we will be doing a live Facebook chat, and I think that you'll be kind of answering some more questions after today's webinar is over. So if we don't quite get to your question today, you can join us on the ACE Fitness Facebook page and type in your question there. You can re-watch today's presentation as well using the same YouTube link. And if you have other questions for Dr. Susan Kleiner, you can join us here in just the next few moments, or you can hop over to the ACE Fitness Facebook page. And if you did enjoy today's presentation and you want to learn more about nutrition and understand how to help your clients while staying within your scope of practice as a health and exercise professional, you can take a look at your slide where you will see a few other courses that ACE offers. We do have our fitness nutrition specialist program, as well as weight management specialist program, and another webinar on how to coach clients around the areas of nutrition, which is an important strategy for that behavior change aspect.
Absolutely.
Right? So, as a reminder, you are required to maintain your ACE credential with 20 hours of continuing education in the 2-year renewal cycle. So, that means if you would like to receive continuing education credits, you can do so by joining the ACE CEC Club, and that is on our ACE Fitness page. You can learn a little bit more about that at acefitness.org and gain all of the continuing education credits that you would need for that 2-year cycle for one monthly price. Okay, so let's take some questions.
Great.
We could probably spend another hour, right, taking more questions on this, I believe. So thank you so much for typing in your live questions here. Something that I'll just address kind of as an overarching question for the topic itself. You know, you're mentioning some of the great elite athletes that you've worked with, and that's some of your primary clientele. Maybe some of the primary clientele that we work with as exercise professionals are more the general population. So can we modify? Are there any things that we need to be looking for or adjusting with the information that you've given here today to use this with clients who are not elite athletes?
So when it comes to the energy availability numbers, it's hard to say because those numbers are taken from athletes, like athlete subjects. But the numbers that I have in the charts in my book, you can really feel free to move them down a little bit. You might not change the protein, but the carbohydrate, the fat, the total energy consumption, if you know that you know, as the exercise expert, you can assess that this person's intensity level is much lower, like they just never go to high intensity exercise, then their energy need is going to be a little lower. Their carbohydrate need is going to be a little lower. So that's where you can make some of those adjustments.
And as you mentioned in the presentation, you know, making sure that if you are doing some adjustments that you are an expert, and what that means for our fitness professionals is that if they have a registered dietitian credential, if they are licensed, right, then they can be adjusting and providing those meal plans. But also if they have their certification through ACE or other exercise credential, working with a registered dietitian to make those adjustments, right?
It's really a big fun part of what I do. So after 35 years of doing this, I still never give an exercise prescription because I respect my peers that are exercise specialists, and it is in my best interest to not step out of my scope of practice, even though I surely now could do it, but I won't. It's also much more fun for me to partner with someone else in working. There's always a different perspective, different information that I gain, and so I love that partnership, and I would say most dietitians do as well.
Great. Yes. So partnering is key here when working with nutrition. So we have a couple of questions that are coming in around the kind of the age of clients that this type of information could be useful for. What's your take on using this information for youth athletes?
So as I said, the energy availability data is not from youth athletes. Although I would say, certainly by 18, we could be using that data, and maybe it applies to sort of the more mature high school athlete. Certainly my numbers can be used in the kind of the same way, but these are not pediatric numbers.
Right.
And so there are books and there are specialists in the area of pediatric sports nutrition, and I strongly recommend that you seek those out.
Great. One of the other things that we saw on the slides was the list of the various foods that could be chosen as high quality food sources for carbohydrates and fats and proteins. So if someone is, looking to give a little bit of education to their clients, providing a list like that is appropriate, would you say?
Yes, 100%.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
I actually love those lists because when I speak in other venues with personal trainers, the concept of only talking about macronutrients specifically and not food is a very reductionist way of thinking, and it takes the client away from how important whole food really is and how much they gain from food. And it is more fun for them to think in terms of food. And so it's helpful, I think, to have those lists, even though they sort of are titled as protein-rich, fat-rich, or carbohydrate-rich.
Great. So coming from a registered dietitian, providing those great resources, that great list of foods is some great education for our clients, right? Great. So you talked a little bit about, you worked with an athlete, Sue Bird, who's a basketball player, which is a different metabolic sport need than perhaps a marathon runner.
Right.
So any information that you can share or suggestions that you might have if we want to modify some things or talk to our marathoning clients or longer duration endurance clients about adjusting their nutrition?
So ideally you can get the energy availability data. Really important because there is a wide variation of energy utilization among distance athletes. Some are far more efficient in their running or their sport than others, especially the more experienced you are, the more efficient you are. But the higher the intensity you can sustain for a longer period of time. So getting that is critically important, and the cross-training numbers in my charts don't necessarily apply to that. But energy availability stands across all sports.
That's the real news, right?
That's the real news.
Great.
Right.
So we want to fuel our goal, whether that's playing basketball, running a marathon, taking walks 3 to 4 times a week.
Right.
Whatever that is.
Right.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie.
So if, again, you have other questions for our presenter, Dr. Susan Kleiner today, you can hop on over to the ACE Fitness Facebook page and continue the conversation there. As a reminder, you can receive continuing education credits for this webinar by following the video that is provided on your screen now. You will go to acefitness.org and follow the path there that will take you to the recorded version of the live webinar. If you choose to, you can purchase the recorded version. It will end up in your MyAce account. And once you pass the quiz, you'll receive 0.1 CECs within your MyAce account. Join us again next month as we have SAP member, that is our scientific advisory panel member, Antonio Williams, coming in to talk about how to build your personal fitness brand. So join us if you have questions or are interested in learning how to brand yourself as a health and exercise professional. Dr. Susan Kleiner, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Jackie.
Make sure to connect with ACE in a variety of ways. Let's get people moving.